We're good.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. Like Miriam said, it's been a while since I've been up here on the stage. I feel like I used to give presentations about once a year while I was still coming to Trilug. I was chair back in the 2014-2015 world. Even after that, I feel the last presentation I gave was about Mastodon. And that's my social media handle here, the Mastodon. So I don't know if there's still archives of those presentations, but if you watch them, you'll see that back then I had a little bit more up top before COVID and the child took one from us. But what brought me back to hang out with Trilug again is that I recently discovered Bazite. I recently jumped into the world of Linux gaming, and I tell you what, Linux has not been this fun for me since I first found it. I feel like I'm young again. So I just want to share that joy with you, share my experiences, answer questions, and have a good fun time for the first talk of the year. All right, so to start off with the context of this, I am a video game enthusiast. I do love playing games. I feel like I've been playing games since the day I woke up alive in this world. I remember my father, he would cut the cords off of a controller, sit and strangle myself and give them to me in my crib, convincing I think the world's first fidget toy. I've been playing games ever since because I would watch him play. I'm like, I want to do that too. I want to be just like my dad, right? My first core memory is playing Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest. Anyone remember that one from the 90s? Yeah, depending on how it's localized for you. I remember it, so I always tell the story because that game, it was really, really old-fashioned. To do anything, you had to go through a menu. So if you want to go down the stairs, you can just walk to the stairs. That's a modern convenience. You have to go into a menu and pick the stairs option. If you want to talk to someone, you have to get in their face and take the talk option. So I would be playing the game, I'd ask my mom, which word is stairs? Which word is talk? And that's how I learned how to read very early. So video games are very educational, and I maintain that during my own parenting style. So I curate my games for my kid, and he's playing them on Linux too. So, throughout my childhood, I mostly didn't have a computer growing up, so I was very much into console gaming at the time. But then once I went to college, I got a computer, and I got the internet, and I did something terrible. I got really into the Rise of Richard Stallman.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I was a man possessed because this guy he was making sense. He was talking about how there were going to be TPMs on our machines, and they would stop us from doing things we want to do. And we see this now with video gaming, with the new Battlefield which comes out, which you can't play unless you're using a TPM with secure boot. So Richard Stallman was in fact right and very prophetic at that time. In my case, what I ended up doing though, I kind of went full in on open source everything. So the only games I would play would be the ones that were actually available in package repositories on Ubuntu. So I was playing through basically everything available through there, the whole catalog. So you had Warzone 2100, Super Tux Kart, all the different spin-offs of Rogue and NetHack and those sorts of games.
Yo.
I even started helping out. My first open source contributions were actually to 2 open source games, which are now available on Steam. So that was my very first and unfortunately one of my last open source contributions in the world. But my name is still in the commit history. So that's pretty fun, right? But Super Tux Kart couldn't sustain me forever. Eventually I learned that the world is not as black and white as it is in the Rise of Richard Stallman. And I started to make some compromises because life is too short to only play those games. So I was really excited at the time because my roommate, I started kind of roommate at the time, he had a gaming Windows PC and I would share with him. And I was so excited because I saw the news about Steam showing up on Linux for real, right? I don't know who was here for that news when they saw it, but I was very excited about this. I was extremely thrilled to finally be able to start playing, commercial games on Linux because that was my home. I was so used to it and familiar with it. I didn't want to change operating systems. And as you can imagine, the day one experience was not great. At the time, Proton still wasn't really a thing, so you could only play games that had Linux native ports, and lots of Linux native ports were extremely diverse in terms of which machines they would actually run on, because as it turned out, I had a pretty bad graphics card, the support was all over the place. It wasn't a very well thought out science. I was disappointed. I was sad. And eventually, you know, having my roommate leave and take the Windows PC away with him, I was now kind of like, you know, I was attracted to this new world of games, and I wanted more of that. So that was when I finally decided I wasn't going to use Linux on my main PC anymore and switched to Windows. I know. I still had it on my laptop. I still used it for kind of most of my work stuff. I had a Windows gaming machine, like most people. I had a Wintendo, as they call it sometimes.
Yeah.
And I thought it was going just fine, right? Because, you know, Microsoft, you know, it was maturing with the times. They were supporting Linux. They were, you know, they were making Azure. They were doing, you know, they were finally getting to a point where I felt like I wasn't going to really regret this decision at all, right? They weren't going to do anything bad, and they weren't going to ruin computing forever for everyone. Ever since I pitched this talk to present here, I have been collecting these little memes to add to the slides until it became this collage of shame. But basically what ended up happening was, you know, everyone kind of hits a breaking point. Between OneDrive showing up and eating my files, between recall being recalled, I decided I needed an escape plan, okay? I needed a plan because I couldn't tolerate this anymore. It was, you know, it was kind of ruining the PC for me, and I wanted my computer to be fun again, and where I wasn't going to worry about, you know, if I would still own a machine in 10 years. And as it would turn out, during the pandemic, I picked up one of these guys. This right here is the Steam Deck, which I'm sure, you know, hopefully all of you have at least seen one in your life now.
I have one. I actually have one myself.
Oh, go figure. Yeah, no. And it started opening my mind to, there's been some interesting stuff happening in Linux while I've been, you know, dealing with raising a child, hasn't there? I picked it up mostly because, like, with a kid, it was hard for me to get away and, you know, have, you know, 6 12-hour gaming sessions anymore. So I wanted something I could use on the go, play through my library of a bunch of indie games I picked up in Humble Bundles that I never touched. And it was really cool. It was really fun. Like, a lot of games were working on this device, and like real games, like Cyberpunk was running on it pretty well for lots of people. It was really interesting watching the different news come out about, can you believe this game? It even runs on a Steam Deck, and it's Steam Deck verified, and the developers are throwing support behind it. Thinking, you know what? Maybe they're onto something. But I was still, you know, stuck in the old world thing. But I mean, it's a compatibility layer, right? It can't be that good. It can't be that performant. I would hate to, you know, try and set my real gaming setup with something like this because, you know, I paid for a high-end graphics card. I wouldn't want to leave that performance on the table. But then I started doing some research, and I was looking at these benchmarks people were doing, where they're saying, hey, so there are lots of these handhelds out now. Some of them have Windows on them, some have SteamOS on them, and people are taking them with Windows and putting SteamOS on them and seeing, you know, what's the performance difference like? Because now you have this apples-to-apples comparison. And wouldn't you know it, Windows is pretty bloated. For certain games, and of course every game is different because of the, you know, various functionality they take advantage of. You would have certain games that if you would just play the same game and replace the operating system, you could actually get more performance on Linux instead of Windows. So I think this is really going somewhere. Right? Because they were happy, because like what happened is this translation layer was in a really great spot. So I was thinking, okay, this is serious. So once SteamOS matures and it's available for real on desktops, maybe we can put SteamOS on my gaming PC. And that seems like a pretty logical flow because, you know, it's made by Valve. They know games pretty well. I thought this makes a lot of sense. Then I did more research. So SteamOS is designed fundamentally to work on this thing. And the fact that it works on other things is just a happy accident. The happy accident of open source and technology compatibility. But like fundamentally, you know, this thing is, you know, it's running the AMD graphics pipeline. So I've not tried, but I've seen various, you know, attempts to get SteamOS working on, say, with an NVIDIA graphics card, which is what I currently have in my gaming setup. But luckily, if you start doing any searches for SteamOS, you have a bunch of people telling you about this other really cool operating system instead. And that is something called Bazzite. So Bazzite, again, it's like I said at the very beginning, it's got me really excited for computers again. I really dislike because my whole screen goes black every time I click on a new slide. And also it's really weird looking at the Steam Deck on presenter mode. This has been really great for shock factor, but I don't recommend using a Steam Deck for a presentation machine unless you're really trying to make a point. So what is Bazzite? Let me kind of like spell out all the various features of it and where it comes from and what makes it do its thing. And then we can dive a little bit deeper into my experiences with compatibility and whatnot. So Bazzite is a community project that's built around basically Fedora Silverblue. Who here is familiar with that? Okay, not a whole lot of you. So Fedora, Fedora, right?
Yeah.
More people hopefully know about that. Otherwise, I have to really kind of go back and start explain stuff now. So Fedora Silverblue is kind of an alternative approach to making an operating system that's going to run on a desktop or a laptop. So what it is an atomic container-based operating system. So it's atomic in the sense that whenever you go from one version to another, you're basically replacing the entire operating system all in one go. If you're more familiar with Ubuntu or Debian or anything else, you typically go through an upgrade process where a bunch of libraries, you see a big list in your terminal saying, I'm going to bring this and this, 86 more to go. But with Atomic, it's all or nothing. Atomic as in an ACID transaction in a database. Which means that basically the creators, the maintainers of the operating system are very specifically picking, here are what versions of which packages we want in this release. And what's going to happen is you're going to download the whole thing, and it's going to install the whole thing. And if it doesn't work, we're going to try again and leave your system alone. If it does work, then we're going to throw the old out and bring in the new one.
What's the benefit of that?
So what's the benefit? Let me say what the container aspect is, and I'll explain that. So the other aspect is it's based on a container. So the same containers you're familiar with Docker, Open Compute Foundation containers. Basically, there's this technology called bootc, B-O-O-T-C, which is used to turn a container into something that can boot from UEFI. And the folks behind Bazzite basically built a whole tool chain around making these custom container operating systems, and they make those tools available. So now it's really, really easy for anyone to go out and just take these tools and say, I want to make Bazzite, but I want to make it all green, and make their own spin of it, give it its own name, and make their own cool thing for it. With atomicity for the OS, I think that the two main benefits are, one, it makes things a lot more safe for novice users. So because you don't have the risk of, say, a power outage during an upgrade, you don't have the risk of a maintainer making a mistake and making you have some kind of broken install. You have a lot of quality assurance from the development team saying, we tested this container's worth of stuff, and we can throw away the other one. What's also neat is anytime we actually save the previous working one, anytime the new one fails to boot, like if the OS doesn't report a good boot in like 1 minute, it'll actually, the second boot, it'll flag grub and say, boot the previous one instead, and hope that works.
Yeah, another benefit there that I've seen a lot of is because of that container aspect, where everyone has the same system files unpacked from that same image. It makes troubleshooting a lot easier, where if one person has an issue, they can say, I'm on this hash of the container, or, well, if not, I'm on this hash of the image,
yeah.
And then, the maintainers can go and reproduce with that exact, bit for bit, exact system files.
Yeah, that's a great point. He was, for anyone who's been here and for the recording, he was saying, whenever you have your container, each container has like a fingerprint, has a hash fingerprint. So anytime you need support from the developers and things are failing, say, I have exactly this hash, and the developers can pull that hash from their tree and try it themselves and reproduce on their hardware. So yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that's brilliant. Now, the thing about operating systems like this, and I know we have probably a wide array of skills from people who like opinionated distribution and people who prefer their distribution to be more agnostic so they can customize it themselves. This is an opinionated distribution. It has lots of opinions that I agree with, and they're all engineered in the sense of making this as a batteries included of a good gaming experience as possible. So they have lots of these cool options. So they have these tags you can apply to the container image. The baseline one is a KDE image designed to run on AMD graphics cards. They also have flags for video hardware. They actually have flags for legacy NVIDIA graphics cards now that some of their older GPUs are being removed from support from the official drivers. They even have a drop-in deck replacement mode, where if you add deck, it basically boots into it from the beginning like a console experience, like a media box experience, like a Roku. You were asking earlier, is there a performance difference? Basically no, because whenever you boot in deck mode, it's actually just running Steam's binaries and Bazlight gets out of the way. Bazlight mostly jumps in when it comes into moving into the desktop mode and handling some of the operating system stuff under the hood. I've not noticed any difference. I've been running Bazlight on this for about 6 months, and it's completely familiar to when I was using vanilla SteamOS. But also what's cool is that they actually make it where you can drop it on to other handhelds as well, and they maintain a handheld compatibility list in case you want to go with something else. Even though I think the Steam Deck is the best bang for buck among the litter there. And even if you are not interested in the cult of Gabe Newell, you don't have to use Steam at all if you don't want to. You can use Heroic Gaming, which is it's an open source front end to Epic, GOG, and Amazon Luna for some reason. It works perfectly well. It gives you all the same convenience factors of being able to grab those Steam compatibility layers. But you can play GOG's DRM-free retro games if you want to, and even running regular things with Wine if you've ever done that before. It's difficult for maybe the first person coming straight from Windows, but I think a Linux user probably is very familiar with what that is. So anyway, that is the whirlwind tour of Bazlight's feature set. This is a screenshot from my 2025 Steam Wrapped, which is a thing that things do. You can see here, I started the year on Windows, and then I got that little blue piece of Steam Deck, and all my time this year on Linux. It's been tremendously fun. You see here I played tons of new games on Linux because there's this fun game I like to play, which is, I bet this won't work on Linux.
Yo.
My mind was blown though, because the one thing I thought for sure, this isn't gonna work. I was able to play Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, the whole cloud AI-driven virtual world thing with all of my flight sim equipment, and it worked just fine on Bazlight. So again, if that's not a vote of confidence, that's what sold me. And Bazlight's been something of a little darling in the Linux computer building space these days. This right here is from their kind of popularity contest telemetry thing, which if you don't turn it off, will add you to these numbers here. As of this month, I didn't update the slides, they've already crossed the 50K user mark, and I probably account for 4 of those. But no, it's showing up all over the place. People are really taking it seriously. It's got a really solid community, and the developers, they on Discord, of course, because it's gaming. The developers are very responsive and very communicative, and you can just join in and see what they're working on. So that's open source. So, what makes all this possible? All right. So obviously, when I've been talking about Bazlight are the packagers who kind of came up with this really streamlined system for making these containerized operating systems, and have solved a lot of the compatibility required for everything that SteamOS isn't engineered to work on. Okay, so they've got all the drivers for you, they have everything set up for you. But what about, how do games actually work on, how do Windows games actually work on Linux? Because you might be familiar with Wine, saying, well, aren't they just using Wine? The answer is yes, they are. Proton is the name of the compatibility layer that's being sort of, run by Valve. And believe it or not, the folks who make Wine, Codeweavers, are actually contracted by Valve to work on Proton, right? So you can really see, Valve kind of putting their money where their mouth is, helping out these open source groups that already have this expertise here, and kind of helping them, give them that support to get them that last mile to make this into something that's commercially viable and usable. And then you have DXVK, DirectX to Vulkan, which we heard a little bit about during November's talk with the Vulkan presenter. And what that's doing is it's a translation layer from Microsoft's graphics programming API down to the open standard of Vulkan. So what's happening under the hood is it's translating those calls to the binary level, so that way, even though the game is written to communicate with the Microsoft layer, the Microsoft layer is then being translated down to an open source layer. And because, if I can pontificate a bit, because so much more intelligence is being put into graphics cards, I think that's kind of what's making this possible, because during the OpenGL days, during the really old DirectX days, your CPU was still like doing a lot of the driving and working the API and communicating with the graphics card. But I think now that so much is kind of programmed, the shaders and whatnot, I think that's really helping us out here. Because you still see, for example, if you read the BASI documentation, that if you're using a really old graphics card, you're not going to be able to use this, because if the graphics card doesn't support Vulkan, you'll be translating down into OpenGL instead, and it's going to be pretty poor performance for anything that's going to be remotely demanding. So I do think that because the graphics cards are getting a lot smarter and offloading a lot more work, the client on the OS side is a lot more thin, so there's less, but I'm very sure it's not a trivial amount of work. I'm sure some very smart people, again, from the talk in November, smart people figuring this out. But what's really cool about all this is that Valve is working with these developers in the open upstream. Something that's extremely satisfying to see is whenever a game is having issues on compatibility, you see these discussed in the public on Valve's GitHub page, on the Proton page. So whenever people are encountering issues with these games, they're able to report them up to Valve, and you can see the conversation happening live between the experts in all different spaces. Maybe it's a DXVK person, maybe it's a wine person, maybe it's someone from Valve directly. So you have this really cool confluence of people working together. And I really think that that's what makes this so fun for me, is that community aspect. The way that when you get the special interest group together, you get them that critical mass of support, you find these communities springing up to solve all these problems. I don't think anything makes that more clear than ProtonDB. So ProtonDB is sort of a community crowdsourced database of game compatibility on Linux. So what you have here is for any game on Steam, you can look it up and you can look and see what the report and support level is. I picked Crysis because that's a popular game from some era. And you can see some of these are rated at gold, some of them are rated at platinum. This one's gold with a growing trend marker. What happens here is whenever folks play these games, they can share their good news and their bad news about the game on ProtonDB, right? So if you look at any of these, you'll just see this this chronological list of people's experiences with these games, and even if they were able to get it working, what did they have to do to get it working? Did they have to tweak it? Did they have to pick a specific version of the compatibility layer? And I mean, if you're going to try and do Linux gaming, having a page like this, kind of like in your bookmarks, is almost essential, because one day they might push an update to the game, or they might push an update to Steam, and things are breaking, and the first thing you want to know is it just me? So this is a really great resource, because even for some really obscure games, I'm still able to find reports that are somewhat fresh about them. With everything, there's going to be trade-offs. The biggest one I think right now is anti-cheat. So we talked a little bit about what that is. Anti-cheat, as the name implies, is software used to prevent people from cheating in games. It detects when you modify memory. It detects if you're manipulating network traffic. And typically it does this by injecting itself into your kernel, rootkit style, to make sure that the operating system cannot lie to the anti-cheating software. That works on Linux, or that works on Windows. That doesn't work so well on Linux because you can control, because you have root access. So this means that lots of AAA games, like multiplayer games, competitive shooters, and even some single-player, always online games, which is a horrible trend the industry is going in, and I don't even really need to get into that right now. Anti-cheat can be kind of a real problem and a real thorn in the side. There are ways for anti-cheat to work on Linux though. Engines like BattlEye, engines like Easy Anti-Cheat do have Linux versions, and developers have the choice to enable them, disable them, and say you can only use it in offline mode. You see that because the Steam Deck is becoming more popular and people are using this for on-the-go gaming, you're noticing developers taking advantage of those options, even if it incurs maybe more work on their end in terms of competitiveness and integrity. And they're also developers who don't care. For me, I don't worry that much about it because I'm not really big on that. I think the whole games as a service model is hurting the industry. If you're more interested in simulation games, indie games, games from smaller AA teams, they typically don't go down this route, so you typically don't have any trouble with them. I can personally say there's not a single game that in my catalog that I play regularly that did not work on the Steam Deck after some level of tweaking, including Microsoft Flight Simulator. And of course, this will not be new to anybody who has used Linux for any amount of time, but there is some assembly required. Bazzite does a lot of heavy lifting for people who are not exposed to kind of the, when there's a problem, figure it out yourself aspect of Linux, okay? Because everything's in the same place, it's much easier for people to help each other because you get to kind of operate under the assumption that their system is not gonna be substantially different from yours. That can be a lot for people who are new to this, but like for me, even coming from like a 5-year break of not using Linux as my main system, like I immediately just slotted right into it. Even with the read-only file system caused by the atomic nature. We can talk more about that later in quick Q&A if you're interested. Again, I still think this is a good thing because it does give you the power to tweak things if they're not working. One cool thing about Proton is that not only can you go back in time to basically every old version of Proton, like if you're playing a 6-year-old game that's never been updated, you can go back to the version of Proton that was live when that was being made, and pin that. Bazzite makes it easy also to install alternative versions of Proton made by other developers who make small minor tweaks for other niche games as well. You might have heard of a Proton GE or Glorious Egg Roll. That's basically a community spin-off of Proton. And Bazzite makes it very easy to download every Proton in the universe. You can pick whichever one you like best. So even when that's a downside, I still find a way to spin it positively in terms of giving you some flexibility to solve these problems yourself. And sometimes you're just stuck. Sometimes the game updates and they break your system and you just gotta wait for someone to fix the game or fix Proton so it works again. But again, like I showed you on the Assassin's Creed thing, it worked, they got the fix out in about 2 weeks or so, which was pretty cool. So, computing is bleak right now, right? The DRAM crisis. Who wants to build a computer this year? Bazzite has just given me a ton of optimism, I think, for gaming. And it just comes from all the different aspects that fit together, from what I've talked about earlier, right? First of all, this is a chart from Steam for their operating system usage since September 2018. This is kept track of by Gaming on Linux, great blog if you haven't seen it. The blue line here represents just the share of Linux users on Steam. When I made this slide, it's about 3%. Official number at the end of 2025 was 3.5%. 3.5% of all Steam users are running Linux of some flavor, whether it's SteamOS, Bazzite, CachyOS, Arch, whatever. The green line here is an interesting metric that they use over on Gaming on Linux called the percentage of English-speaking Steam users using Linux. English-speaking Steam users using Linux, yes. And that's up to 7%. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be a proxy for. I think it's supposed to filter out the outsized populations in Asia, Japan, and China, because they make up a lot of the Steam population as well. But I think it's an interesting number, like saying 3.5% of all Steam users now. Maybe the numbers are getting big enough, we don't need this extra line to make the numbers look better. There's also the side of engineering support coming from Valve here. So we talked about the Steam Deck. They've got 2 other new platforms coming out soon. The Steam Machine, which is basically the Steam Deck in like a little like mini PC set-top box console-like form factor, which is just this one more. And then the Steam Frame, which is very exciting. If you've not heard of that one, what makes it interesting is it is a headset, full computer, running with an ARM processor, but it's not running Android, it is running Linux. Because Steam has secretly been investing for the past several years in a compatibility layer called FEX, which is a x86 to ARM translation layer. So the idea here, if they can pull it off, I kind of have faith they do because they're kind of, they're hitting like 2 for 2 right now, is you'll be able to play VR games made for x86 on this headset without having to run like, some weird version of Android. And I get really excited by this because it makes a lot of new interesting ideas for low-powered budget phones and tablets to be able to play computer games on them, if they're able to really deliver on that promise.
Is that what they've been doing? Like, has this x86 to ARM thing? Is that what they've been doing for like Mac computers?
So is this what they're doing for Mac computers? So most games will make a native Mac build. So I've not seen a lot of Proton conversion in that space happening, but I also don't have a Mac, so I don't look at that space very deeply. So if anyone has updated information, please feel free to share it with me. I'm going to assume that the state of that will get better as this develops. And it could be it's just FX is being used, but it's not being used within Proton proper right now. But again, I've not investigated that, so I'm sort of just talking off the cuff. Okay. ARM compatibility. I'm very excited for seeing Bath on ARM as well, because I would really love to ride a Raspberry Pi for no other reason than to say I did. And also, you can't tell because you don't, there's Radeon, you can't tell. When it comes to GPU support, most people will tell you that if if you can pick whatever you want for a Linux machine, you should be going with AMD opposed to its competitors, right? And one of the main reasons for this is that AMD's work is done upstream in the kernel. All of AMD's drivers go directly into the Linux kernel as opposed to NVIDIA's, which you download separately and have to package them into special BASI versions with additional tags in the container. And I think this is also really cool, right? Because you see this another manufacturer who is, forward-facing with the open source community, forward-facing with the Linux community to get this out there. Whether they're doing it for gaming reasons, AI reasons, neither or both, I'm just happy they're there. What's also really neat as an anecdote for AMD is that when the Steam machine was released, they had to advertise this technically being HDMI 2.1 compatible, but it wouldn't be if you were using SteamOS. The reason for that is that while AMD was able to develop and wanted to publish an open source implementation of HDMI 2.1 and put it within the operating system so it would be ready on the Steam machine, the consortium that runs HDMI would not permit that. Make of that what you will, but I also see this as being like a good signal from a company.
Was that from the 2015 Steam machine?
No, this is for the 2025 Steam machine.
Oh, okay.
Or 2026 now.
Because I know they made there was the first attempt that didn't go really well.
Yeah, first Steam machine is a wonderful quirk of history. I think they can pull it off this time. That was the AMD story, cool. And again, when it comes to also, I did promise to mention this because it's very timely. It's so timely I didn't even have time to make a slide for it. As we know, trying to make a new computer right now using current parts is an absolute mess and a sad thing. You don't want to do it. And it's also kind of hard to make an older machine too, because now you can't get old versions of Windows either. But guess which OS works good on old hardware? I actually, when I first pitched this presentation, wanted to present this from a 12-year-old gaming laptop. It was still running like a GTX 1050 mobile edition. And it was cool because when I got BASI on it, because it was during my big BASI install fest in my room, I got it working, and it was actually performing better than it was on Windows when I finally decommissioned the Windows side of it, which was really cool for a 10-year-old machine, 12-year-old machine. I don't know how old it was. Time stops working after 10 years. Unfortunately, it fell apart because I flew too close to the sun. I wanted to replace the spinning hard drive with an SSD, and I must have dislodged some load-bearing gunk, and then it died. So, goodbye, laptop. The moral of the story, though, is if you want to build like a budget machine, there's lots of really cool builds happening on YouTube where people build these budget machines using 3 generations ago hardware and make these really cute little budget boxes, and they put BASI on them. In fact, I made one of those for my kid, and that's what we play video games on every night together. And when it comes to companies that don't know what they're doing, I was really worried when they made the little like teaser announcement for the Xbox Ally. Basically, it was their answer to Steam Deck, like $1,000 handheld at that time. Who knows what it costs now? And they were like, "This is an Xbox." I was thinking, "Oh no! If they're able to do what Steam did, and basically bring all their stuff down into a miniature operating system that can run completely without a desktop environment, that would be real competition, I think, to Steam, because it's a little long in the tooth. The Steam Deck is like, it's a great machine. I love it so much. I still think it's the best in the market. If they can pull it off, I'd be a little scared for them. But then they went and put Microsoft Teams on it. Because that's really what I need when I'm playing games is Teams reminders. So like, it's not perfect, right? Nothing's perfect, but I really think it's a great entry point. I think it's a great entry point for either the person who was forced off of Windows 10, but Windows 11 doesn't work on the machine, and they still want to keep their game library mostly in a working state. I also think it's good as maybe like an intro to anyone who wants to try gaming and they're already familiar with Linux, but they don't want to play the driver installation game, because that could be a ton of fun as well. I think Bazelite's really, really great for them because the predictability of that container-based environment where you have this common foundation between everyone, I think it's really good, and it's good enough where you don't need a lot of tweaks to get any sort of meaningful performance out of it. The beauty of Linux, though, is you can just take the software and put it on any other distribution and do that. Like SteamOS is actually built on Arch, and there's another very popular distro called CachyOS. They exist to be, they also like to fly close to the sun. They want to give you every little bit of performance out of your machine that you can get. But I'm not ready for Arch yet. Sorry, it's nothing personal. I'm just not ready for it yet. For me, I like this because, again, like I said, I agree with all their opinions, right? So for me, this is like installing an operating system where I have to make the least number of tweaks before I feel happy playing with it. That applies to the desktop environment, all the various plugins. In fact, I promised I'd say this earlier. Tailskill is installed by default on Bazelite, right? So it's right there in the terminal. They didn't have it ready for you. Just log in and you can connect to your Tailnet. So that's also pretty neato because I just got into that recently. And again, the community is really friendly. Like between ProtonDB, the Bazelite community out there, it can be a little difficult, I think, for anyone who's not used to joining the communities and like saying my computer's not working, and asking the developers to help them. In fact, I'm reminded of another anecdote. I tried to press it down, but I actually want to press this. I don't know what the D-pad's going to do in a presentation. Gamers Nexus did a presentation where they were talking about where they're actually doing Bazelite benchmarks, because again, that container gives them a really consistent baseline to get numbers that can be compared from run to run. And they were saying that it was such a breath of fresh air when they were encountering trouble, when normally when they have to contact manufacturers, they get stonewalled or just get PR answers. But when they needed help figuring out why this isn't working in Bazelite, they just phone the developers like, oh yeah, I'll tell you what's up. That's really, the community aspect really is what probably underpins all my optimism for what's going on here. And as you can see here, I've got like the various influencers. You got PewDiePie, he's still relevant. You got Linus up there. Not that Linus, the other Linus. And like, even on mainstream channels, which are ostensibly exist just to sell you ads, they're mentioning Linux as being like a reality. I remember that, the idea of using Linux for AAA gaming was just not a thing. Like, it was a joke to bring it up. But now when you go to places like PC Builder and stuff, you'll see people saying in full earnest, like, oh, I don't think it's ready yet. And that's a huge change in the public perception about the maturity of the technology compared to it'll never happen, right? Now, am I saying 2026 is the year of Linux on the desktop? I'm not saying it. But I mean, I do think there's a change in people's perception, both in terms of frustration with the incumbents in the space and the kind of the massive generational leaps that are happening thanks to pushes from really passionate and well-funded other groups. So, resources. You need resources to use Linux. That's a reality. Universal Glue is the name of the team that kind of created Bazite. They built a whole pipeline around this idea of these containerized operating systems. They have a number of them. They have some developer-focused ones, which are neato. They've actually got their own spin-off of UCore. No, CoreOS. Their spin-off is called UCore. I'm running that on my home lab. That's a fun one. It also has Tailscale installed by default. Bazite.gg is where you can actually find this. You can find their stats page and just keep track of, how their numbers are going up, because that's kind of my favorite thing to do right now, is just see how good they're winning. Game Analytics is a great blog if you just want to be peripherally engaged in the space. You see lots of news for new games coming out, shaming developers whose game used to work without a problem on Linux, but they intentionally broke it, mostly for anti-cheat reasons. They have an anti-cheat compatibility database of their own that they maintain. And they also keep up with all sorts of news, like new Mesa versions, new DXVK versions. That's where I first saw the news about the whole FEX compatibility layer. And all in all, this is a really great resource. And of course, ProtonDB, which again is sort of your flying companion if you decide to make this leap into the world. Anyway, so that's me. That's me talking for 41 minutes and 51 seconds. Are there any questions? Does anyone want a tour of Bazite on the Steam Deck?
Yeah, I got one.
Tour.
Okay, what's up?
Do you know if the browser that comes bundled with Bazite is Flatpak or non-Flatpak?
It's Flatpak.
Okay, are you familiar with why that might not be a great thing?
Depends. Are you talking about for the password manager?
I'm talking about specifically the how it screws with browser sandboxing. Firefox and Chrome, I think, use BPF filters that don't work in Flatpak, so they use a fork server. Let me grab the name for that in a second.
Yeah, Flatpak.
They use Zypack. That was it. And then, so browser sandboxes are somewhat untested / unproven and maybe broken inside of Flatpaks. That was always my issue with
Did you say
using them.
extensions?
Huh?
Sorry, you say what broken?
Like browser sandboxing.
Well, yeah,
Well, potentially broken, like between tabs, for example.
Between tabs, yeah. Yeah, I know it breaks KeyPass because of the inter-process communication troubles when you have everything's Flatpaks, unfortunately.
Yeah,
you can layer. So you can layer stuff. I can show you how it works. So I'm going to show you my desktop now by doing a mirror display. Let's see how this 800p resolution works. Hey, there we go. That's not too bad. All right, cool. It's just GNOME. You see, it's just GNOME. So let's see here. Terminal. Let me do a fast fetch real quick because that's something that the cool kids do on the Linux YouTube channels.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Look, my resolution is so low, I don't have to zoom in. Yeah, Steam Deck has a 1280 by 800. So, yeah. So by default, the browser is Flatpak, right? And because it's an atomic containerized OS, you can't just do a DNF install because you're going to lose all your installations you'll lose all your installations anytime the thing is reinstalled, right? You can do layering, which kind of basically changes that container for you, doing the same thing you would do when building a Docker container. On this machine, I don't have any layers, but on my laptop, I had to layer on my printer drivers. And it's not recommended, but you can do what you got to do if you accept the risk of it. So in theory, you could probably install a browser, and maybe if you don't, you could just try something else like a WaterFox instead, and layer that one on, and that might work better.
So what'd you have to do about KeyPass?
I just don't use a browser plugin. I just make it a little harder on myself and use a separate window.
Was Fast Fetch pre-installed?
Fast fetch?
Yeah.
Yes.
Twice you mentioned, did you say tail or tailed or tail?
Tailscale. Tailscale is a Darling like home lab VPN company. It makes it really easy like to install a VPN endpoint on something on two machines that you own and SSH between them. They're cool. They show up at All Things Open. Most are stacked as open source.
You said you're doing QPass as a separate window. Does it do the auto type on there or
Oh, and I use the
copy paste?
sometimes I don't use copy and paste. I read it in human clipboard. Go ahead.
Yeah, there is actually a way to get KeyPass up and running, but it takes some fiddling.
I'm not.
And
Yeah.
it does not work by default just because of how Flatpak is, where, you know, program A can't talk to program B unless you go and punch the right holes in it.
Oh, yeah. Again, everything's possible. That's the nice thing about Linux. Everything is possible. There are inadvisable ways to get those things happening, and the maintenance, it's not worth it for me. I just say, you know what? Maybe a plugin isn't actually the best thing anyway. I convince myself of the other way around. But yeah, no. I can delve in a little bit more about the difference between like gaming mode and deck mode, or gaming mode and desktop mode. So over here at my start menu, you'll see I have a thing called Return to Gaming Mode, and that is basically the let's see if it works. That's basically what you would get on a regular Steam Deck. I guess I'll log out. I don't know. Let's see what happens. There's a bug right now where switching between modes doesn't work well if you're plugged into an external display. So I'll be able to send a video with my bug report if I write one. So in gaming mode, Steam developed a thing called, there we go. Steam developed a thing called GameScope. And GameScope is a compositor that basically lets you run all these games without even needing a desktop environment. So it just literally runs it. This is a desktop environment. It's Steam. Pretty neat, right? It's got Civilization 7. Isn't that great?
Can you install it on other distributions?
It's a miniature.
What GameScope?
Yeah, like how do you install it on other distributions?
So, I mean, you can actually install it anyway. So one thing you can do, let's say you're having some trouble because Wayland gives you trouble, right? Because it's Wayland, right? You can actually launch GameScope in a window, and then every sub window that's supposed to be in Steam, it's like running like the Steam Deck mode in a window on your desktop. But booting directly into this, I don't know how you would get that on a different distribution. They do a lot of magic behind the scenes, the Bad Eye team does, to make this work and to make things like the D-pad work. I was afraid it wasn't gonna work just now. The latency, I think, is not great with this setup. But yeah, no, they do a lot of work to make these buttons work, because it's not just a plugged-in controller with X input, it's its own nonsense mess.
I think they bundle it with Steam nowadays.
What?
The compositor.
Yeah.
So you can use it like within your environment. You
They
just have to
probably
do some
do.
I think
magic
it's,
to launch it.
it replaced what was previously big picture mode. It's the same like view menu
Yeah.
in the normal desktop Steam client can get you to that. I believe it doesn't run through GameScope. I think it just runs on your normal desktop though, if you do it that way.
Yeah, well, unless you can explicitly start GameScope as an option though, to avoid any Wayland windowing bugs, because sometimes Wayland doesn't have a whole lot of systems to support like the borderless full screen mode. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So GameScope is often a tweak people can use to get around those issues as well. Just another tweak in your toolbox.
So I'm assuming there's a live ISO version, so I've got a lot of old hardware, I could try it out.
So there actually isn't one yet, but it's under active development. So watch that space. I think it's still in its experimental stages. If you start it, it'll give you the live ISO option, but you'll click it, it'll just go to install anyway because it doesn't work yet. I was a little surprised. I was also planning on just doing the live ISO first, but I said, "Oh, okay, I guess we're in now."
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think they actually do have it up on their site because I actually installed it yesterday on an old machine and I was able to get the live environment.
Oh, great.
The big asterisk though is that NVIDIA drivers don't work in there, so you have to
Ah.
boot it with software rendering, and it is really laggy until you can get through the install.
Okay. All right. Cool. I did not. Any other questions?
Why is Bazai built off of Fedora as opposed to Arch like CMOS is?
I think so. The justification I got was it was related to the kernel's development speed or the kernel patches they utilize, but I don't have enough inside information to know what specifically that means. But I believe it was specifically around the kernel. Because they like to tend to a specific Fedora kernel, and I don't know, maybe Arch is the one that's on the rolling, or
I think it's also just the like Bootsy tooling and OS tree tooling
that
is
makes sense too.
the most stable on Fedora.
Yeah.
I did see recently they are starting to sort of adapt it to other distros, where instead of a Fedora container that you're basing from, I saw someone do like an Ubuntu one and an Arch one, and they were able to get those working in Bootsy, but Fedora is where a lot of that infrastructure was built out, so that's where the development has been for the past few years.
Yeah, I'm actually I joined the C and CF Slack just so I could join the Bootsy channel and watch those developments. And also, one of the Bazai maintainers, I believe, recently won the election to join the steering committee for the Fedora development, the Fedora development steering committee. So that was cool. But yeah, no, it's exciting stuff. Like I said, it's I feel like like computing is so fun again because I found myself loving all the weird technology that is being developed in this space. Things like Bootsy, because I love containers. Containers are super cool, and I think there should be more of them.
So Barry, how much does one of those run?
Pardon me?
How much does one of those Steam Decks run?
Can't get that one.
Well, it's unfortunate you missed your opportunity during Black Friday. These can be for $320.
Oh my goodness.
But they no longer are making, so this is the old LCD screen, and now they're not making that anymore. They're selling only the OLED one, so that's gonna be a premium. And of course, RAM now costs, your firstborn child, so.
Yeah, the 512 OLED is $550 right now.
Still not bad.
They didn't raise it yet, so.
The 1 terabyte one is $650.
Not bad.
I looked on eBay while you were talking, and there were some for $250. I don't know what generation those were.
I mean, probably the first
Steam
generation.
Decks, yeah.
Because I mean, there's the very first one, the lowest spec one was 64 gigs of hard drive space, which is not gonna hold many games.
Oh, gosh.
But was it, maybe it was 128, maybe it was 128, 256, 512, or the 64?
Yes, it
I
was
think
128.
Yeah, okay.
And you can open the back and it's just an M.2 slot.
Yeah, you can bring your own.
Steve was like, "You shouldn't do this," as they posted a video on how to do it.
Oh, and one other fun party trick is so the Steam OS, whenever you put a SD card in for extra game storage, uses ButterFS and has its own like file storage thing for your library. That's what Bazai uses as well. So you can make a portable game library, which I do for most of my indie games, and I just have them all on a portable hard drive and bring my library around.
Does Steam force the entire like SD card to be that, or can I also just make like other ButterFS sub volumes on that drive?
I think if you tell Steam to be the one to format, it's gonna do what it wants to do.
Fair enough.
And then if you do it yourself, as long as you set up where it can read it correctly, I don't know what it'll do at that point. Fun experiment idea though. Anyway, that was me. I love Linux. I love games. It feels good to have them both on the same machine again. But if there's nothing else, we can wrap up.